All right. Well, looks like we're coming on right on time, 8 o'clock. So I'd like to welcome everybody to Coach's Corner. I am going to do a quick check and make sure it's actually working everywhere because I don't normally start these up. So as much as everyone else has done all of that back end work for us, we had great producers, and I can't thank them enough. In this case, I get to be the producer, and if this failed, I apologize, and we'll try again. But on that note, Bess, can you tell if we're up and running?
I will look at the screen.
And Tom, you can go ahead and unmute and come back up. Awesome.
Well, I'm looking. Oh, no,
Tom,
we're up.
You can go ahead. No, we're good. It looks like it. Awesome. All right. Well, first I'm going to welcome everybody, and we're going to give a couple minutes as people are queuing up here. We'd like to thank. It looks like we have Tristan just coming on. He's actually our producer for tonight, so he would have done a much better job. But here we are. Tonight's episode is interview with Duke Tom and or Tommy T. The great point is that we've been friends a long time. He was in Michigan for a long time and moved to Northshield, won a couple crowns there, and now we get to hang out tonight and ask some questions. And I'm going to ask some of my normal ones, more on probably on the fighting side, and dig in a little bit at the ones I'm used to. And then Bess has some like sideways ones, and that's why we love her on the show. She throws those out, and she keeps it interesting for sure. So good luck, Tom, on those.
I'm good.
And we may see Tristan pop in time to time. I offered if he has some stuff to say. He's always great to have on the show as well. So right now, I believe he's going to take all your questions, and we'd love to hear some. You guys have posted up some questions, and if not, we're just going to kind of nail this and hang out. So I'm going to go ahead and let Bess throw her first question at you, just to start out the wildness. Bess is not even ready for this, but she's.
Oh, this is great. How'd you
She
find
gets
out
stuff
about
right
this?
off top of her head.
Go ahead.
So let's. I'm going to highlight her, or actually, I'm going to go ahead and let Tristan highlight her.
How'd you find the SCA?
So I went to Grand Valley State University, which is in the west side of Michigan. When you see the words Grand Valley, you don't necessarily think West Michigan, but that's where it was. We were just walking back from a class, and there was a couple of guys fighting in armor, and I've always loved everything to do with anything medieval, and saw that and like, I have to see what this is. And then they let us get in some loaner gear, and it was in the dark ages when, you know, the shield edgings were like this big and nobody ever shaved down their handles. So got to fight for a bit. It was like every bad Conan movie ever. You know, we just took giant honking swings at each other, and by the end of the day, I couldn't close my hand around a can of pop because I gripped the sword so hard that my hand was totally burned out. And I was begging them where I could go make gear because I just wanted to do it again. So that was in 91, I think. So 90, 91, something like that.
And have you stayed in the SCA ever since?
Yep, with a couple of very small gaps due to life issues here and there. And of course, the last 2 years are kind of weird. I've been as active as I can be, but you know, obviously things have been shut down, so that's been a little weird.
Yeah. So what kingdoms have you lived in? Where have you been?
So I spent the first 16, 17 years, something like that, in the mid-realm. I started out, like I said, in Grand Valley, which is Sandalcraig, in Rimsholt. And then from there, I moved into Lansing, which was Northwoods, and was there for quite a while till about 2006 when the economy started to go. Lost my job there, moved out to Northshield in north of Minneapolis, and I've been in Nordskogen out that way ever since.
Nice, nice. And what's your weapon form of choice?
Well, there's only one weapon really. The one true weapon is polar.
Oh, cool beans.
And other things exist, and some people are really amazingly good with them, but the one true weapon is polar.
So clearly, you know, you do singles, and that's great. We know that. But do you, with polearm, do you consider yourself a singles or melee fighter, or a mix?
Well, so the funny thing with that, in a sense, is when I started in the SCA, I loved melee. Everything about melee, whenever I could get melee, all the time. It initially gave me more options to kill people. It let me feel more involved because when you're new, you just get killed a lot. And so it can be a little frustrating, but in melee, that changes. You know, if you work with a team, you can kill
Mhm.
anybody. So that made it quite interesting. And then, so I liked that for a long time. And over time, I gradually moved more and more to the single side as I improved my skill. So, and I learned more about fighting and understood how it works. And it just, singles grew on me more and more and more. Insofar as like a melee versus singles fighting with polearm, there's differences there, obviously. I don't really like 7.5 foot polearms, so I take my 6 footer out into melees. That doesn't bother me.
Wow.
And most of the time, what I do is I carry my spear and my polearm, and then I carry both until I'm pretty sure what the engagement's going to be. If it's a running engagement, I just drop the spear and go after him with the polearm. If it slows down into a line engagement, I'll just drop the polearm and use the spear.
Sure,
And that's
that
worked pretty well for me. But in singles, I don't feel like there's any situation I can't fight effectively. Doesn't mean I win every fight, but I can be an effective combatant in any environment with a singles fight.
So
So, go ahead.
no, I'm going to ask my usual question, Brannos. So Brannos and I have been talking about this
Oh,
question.
here we go.
Well, it's a good question.
It
So-
is.
Brannos and I have been talking about this point for about a year and a half now, I think. Brannos describes himself as a really thinking fighter. Like he consciously analyzes the fight. Some of our guests have said that they are, well, of course, we all analyze a fight. They find that they do it more unconsciously and respond to it that way. And so I'm curious, do you view yourself as a more conscious fighter, so to speak, or an unconscious fighter?
So I would have to answer that as a hybrid, because when I lived in Michigan, some of the things that have really stuck me over time are some of the teachings I got from Brannos, which was very much on the analytical, break things down, plan things out, set things up in a way that you can make the dominoes fall for you. And, you know, learning how to exert pressure, learning how to look for gaps, make gaps, all those kind of things over time really influenced how I do things. But I also have a lot of, I guess, natural instincts I like to take advantage of. So I try very hard to get to that no mind state for a lot of my fighting. But in any type of gap or any type of setup for the fight, it's thought out. So before the action starts, I would say it's very analytical, very planned. Once we start moving and when you have to go through transitions and things change on contact, that's when it becomes much more of, I guess, an instinctual fight at that point until I can break again and think.
So
I
so
would
far
guess
it's
that,
50-50, Brannos.
well, no, I mean, if you look at what we talked about, when we talk about it, the execution of the, hold on, I'm going to do something here. The execution should be no mind, right? So you shouldn't ever have, this is that 10,000 blows and all of, you know, your movement, the blows, the blocks, all of those are executions. So you're executing something. You should never have to think about those, because remember, the thought of thinking while you're doing something causes you to slow down.
Mm-hmm. So
you want execution to essentially be without thought and without really emotion, all of those other things. And then prior to execution, we want the ability to analyze and figure out what's going to happen based on a plan or on that thinking game. While we're putting it together, it's and you want it to be really that what we called the OODA loop before. You plan, you go through and you execute, planning, and then execution, and then you evaluate, and then you redo it again. But so it's really, what he's saying is pretty close to what we do. The people that the big difference usually is in when people get emotional and then their emotions take over the fight. Mm-hmm. And then they don't plan because they're not thinking well. And that thinking piece breaks down. I mean, we do agree, Tom?
Yes. And the emotion thing, for a lot of people, think it's only when they're desperate or angry, but it can be when you're happy too. If you're
Yeah.
too excited about your fight, you'll over pursue. If you're too worried about it, you won't pursue enough. If you get too much of that in any direction, it throws off your ability to actually use your plan. And it gives your enemy opportunities. You're opening up transitions, you're slowing yourself down. All of those things are generally bad. But yeah, so for the non, well, let's just go with the best version and the Brannos version because that's easier. So the best parts of my fighting would probably be the gap between the planned part and the execution part that's no mine. Like if there's a sudden transition and I need to break my plan because what I wanted to do is walk into a trap or it looks like it's not going to be successful, that small moment has to be often just go with what I think is right and then execute some, no mind plan out of that, hopefully. Like if I get to the spot, and this is a matter of execution time. So if you transition around on someone and you're trying to sidestep them or something, and let's say they change their footwork suddenly, well, that gives me a couple options. I have to choose one of those quickly. And sometimes I can't do that with a plan. So that becomes more of an instinct. But then once I get to the spot, whatever recognition I have becomes the plan again. So, and that's part of the training and building up your no mind is that you can get to that spot and it just executes because, oh, that's right here, or drop back into a thrust, or block here, follow them back, backhand them around the side. Those kind of things are all built in, but they have to get to the right spot to trigger a lot of times. And sometimes that spot movement is not for me. So.
And I guess there's, you even inside that, there's those times where you can really dive into the zone, right? And when you're in the zone, nothing, nothing's really coming from outside, and you have one line of thought. You don't have to worry. You're not thinking about, okay, is my defense right? Is my, what's, even to a point where what are they doing? Where's their pressure? It's sometimes you get to that zone where you're processing the input so fast that, and you're thinking at it, right? But you're not overwhelmed with any other thoughts. So you're processing things so fast, and then execution is totally no mind.
Yep.
And that's the zone. And that's a hard place to get to. I'm, Mind of a Fighter. I'm reading a number of the books that he mentioned in that. I don't think it's Mind of the Fighter. I forgot it. The Fighter's Mind. And I'm just reading. There's a book by the chess player that he talked about in that book. And I'm just going through that book now. And this is exactly. He even talks about how to get into the zone. There's, we talk about, well, and this would be a good question. So, Tom, before a fight, like we know Wrongwalder walks out there, like the Bess is nodding her head because she wants to know too. Before a fight, do you have a ritual? Because ritual is kind of part sometimes of helping that way to get people into the zone.
Yes, my ritual is breaking other people's rituals.
And that's very true, brother.
Mm-hmm.
It is. They talked about that in the book. Even.
Yep, that's a Wrongwalder I got from decades ago. When he would talk about how you go in all smiles, they're all looking piss and vinegar and angry and they want to come get him, and he'd walk up and hug people and just break them out of that, or find the spot on the field they've wanted to be in all day and get there first. Little things like that. Anything to mess up their rituals breaks them out of their pre-planned thought process. So I do a lot of that.
Let me ask you though, does that, that breaks their mindset. Does it help center you in your mindset at all when you do that?
Yes, because a guiding principle in my mind is Conan. Crush your enemies, drive them before you. Hear lamentations of their significant others. When you crush your enemies, you can crush them a lot of different ways, right? You can crush them mentally, you can crush them physically, or you can crush them spiritually. And when you take and mess with someone mentally, that's one thing, but taking on their spirit, people have a hard time understanding what their spirit is in a fight, how to control that, how to be useful with it.
Correct.
And when you take that away from someone, they don't even realize what they've lost because they don't recognize it in the first place. And it's massive in the fight, in my opinion. So
yeah, and it's interesting because they talked about it in the book. He didn't realize that because setting a ritual can be a positive thing, but it can be a negative thing if your opponent understands what you're doing, because they can break that ritual, and they can also cause you without even knowing what's going on and that it's actually happening. That it's, what happens is they don't know that, it's like, oh, they got all beefed up for this fight. And then Rongwalder's over there hugging him. And they're like, oh, Rongwalder's such a nice guy. Well, Rongwalder's a dick because he just ruined their ritual.
Yep. Yep.
Right. I mean, that's what we're talking about here, right? It's
Mhm.
and in the game they talked he talked about, he would watch how people even acted normally, like, do they run in from the rain or do they relax and just sit in it and take their time getting back, because that tells you the kind of thinker they are.
Mhm.
And then you can use those things when you're actually in combat.
Oh yeah.
Right. So it's a really, really interesting game subconsciously, what you're doing to people.
Mhm. It's like your pressure, but in a different avenue.
Yeah.
So, yep. It's learning at least what I know and understand of what you've taught me over pressure over the decades. And admittedly, I don't have it to the grasp I wish I did, but you can apply it outside of just throwing a shot or setting a defense. And
Yes.
that, along with jujitsu, really made a huge difference for me in that regard. So it changed my game a lot, and for the better. So
That's
Quickly.
an interesting thing. Do you do jujitsu outside of the SCA, or did you do it? Do you do it now?
I can't do it now for a couple of reasons. It's I've had a number of joint injuries that have been pretty significant. They're not super bad for SCA, but having my knee or my wrist in a wrist lock would be bad at this point. Also, last February I had a heart valve put in, which has worked, great. But I can't really afford to get kicked, thrown, and smashed to the ground super hard like I used to. It runs a risk of dislodging it. So got to be a little careful there. But I did about, a little more than 10 years of jujitsu out here with, in the SCA, he was Sir Alric. His real name is Troy Stowe. He's most of my boss at Wells Fargo, but he's a fantastic jujitsu fighter, and he knows a lot of different things. He's good at Hapkido. Tristan would know him pretty well. Really, really, really good. And just taking his teachings and trying to figure out how to apply them to polearm over the years, it changed my footwork. It changed how my weight distribution is. It gave me better transitions, trying to figure out 2 and 3 control points at all times. All those things made a huge, huge difference in my SCA game. So
We recently had an episode on coming back from injuries, and clearly you've had a couple of injuries. So how has it been for you coming back from an injury? How did you find the motivation or the desire to come back? What did you do to come back?
So that's interesting because I've had 4 different bouts of flesh-eating bacteria. Each one was a couple of months off for that.
Oof.
The last one made my left calf look like a overripened hot dog or overcooked hot dog, and the skin just fell off. That was fascinating. The wrist surgery I had, I ripped a ligament in my wrist, so they ended up cutting the tendon that runs down my arm, drilled it through the wrist bones, tied it off, so it's kind of split. So I've got a full tendon groove back here, and I've got a tendon through here, which limits my movement on it, but it's rock solid, and that works. I just can't use a sword in my left hand anymore. Can't throw a wrap. It gets to a point and it just locks because it won't move. But so I'm learning right-handed and I'm left-handed, so that's fun. As far as motivation goes, I get this is not the same for everybody, but I am incredibly driven to want to fight. There's nothing I like more than putting on my armor and going out and fight. And every time I've been out, like the heart, I had to sit out for a year and a half before they would do the surgery, and I couldn't do anything. So I go to practices and I would, try to help people and stay involved as best as I could. But the second they cleared me, I was still on blood thinners. They're like, yeah, you can do that. You're just going to bruise. I'm like, all right. So I went back. I had a bruise up and down my leg where I got hit. And it was interesting. But the second I could be in the field, I was on the field. And it's been the same with the wrist and everything else. The first time I came back to the wrist, I fought single sword right-handed just because I wanted to go fight. So
yeah, it's that part of life is definitely, there's a lot of Zen in there, right? I mean, that's kind of, it gets interesting because meditation becomes a big part of learning how to get into the zone as well, and allowing the practice of clearing your mind. So that way you're emotional, you're mad, you're thinking about other stuff. Somebody's playing music on the side of the field and it's bugging you, or people are talking, or people are watching. All of these things pressure you, and you start thinking about those things. And there's lots of different ways to get there, but meditation's part of, is one of the ways that you can get past that. And one of the big pieces, you can't make it a fight. And a lot of people want to, it's like, they get angry because they're trying to stop themselves from that bothering them. And then you get into that place where it has to be part of the atmosphere, and you have to let that freedom go, because otherwise your mind will never let go, because you're still holding that anger and you're trying so hard that you're actually wearing yourself out, in your brain. Your fight will degrade because you're just getting tired, not physically, but mentally tired.
Yep.
And that happens again, the book I was reading, it happens in chess. People will do that in chess as well. And they'll drag out games because they know that people get so intense. And sure, the game will run 3, 4, 5 hours, or even a lot more, which I was surprised to hear. But they'll drag them out and then have like a weekend of this going on. And so some people, they get so intense that after 2, 3 hours, or 2, 3 games, they're done. They can't, they start losing it. And every move counts, and every thought counts in those scenarios. So
yep.
It's interesting. I think, there's a lot of different ways to get to that place. And for, I think, Tom, you're a lot like me, that place, I don't necessarily have, sorry, something flying at me. I don't necessarily have, at least I don't know I have, that I need to go through some ritual. I get on that field and there's just one thing, it's like, this is this time to execute perfectly, challenge myself. And essentially that's my field. So you've come onto my field and it is time for you to go.
Yep. I struggle more, honestly, with practices and people that are not super high-end fighters than I do with the high-end. For that reason, when I fight the high-end, it kicks everything in. I'm focused. I plan, I'm trying to execute, I'm doing all the things. I don't have to worry about anything except just go out and do my fight. If I'm at a practice and I'm fighting someone that's brand new, well, my weapons mix is a bad mix for new people to start with. So you try to think out, well, I don't want to just get hit, but I don't just want to murder people left and right. So how do I adjust this to make it useful? And then you think a bunch, and then you're trying to play nice with people, or you try to work on something different. And all of that degrades what I'm doing for me. Sometimes it's better for them, and that's fine. I mean, it is practice, but it's not the same situation, really. So I do enjoy practices when there's a couple of really high-end fighters that I can just go fight with. And so we'll take a few minutes out of practice, get that particular itch scratched, and then we'll go back to training. So
I guess at practice, give us, we'll go back. Obviously you think about the game a lot.
Mm-hmm.
How do you, first of all, let's how many squires do you have?
Currently 6.
Okay, great. So when, obviously each person requires different things, but what are the core principles that you usually work on with your dependents or with other people at practice, or anyone, when you're out there? What are the things that you think are first and foremost before they try to move on to the next pieces?
So you could break that into a couple of ways, right? So you have fighting skills and fighter related thoughts, and then you have everything that's not on the field. And some people are incredibly successful with their squires when they mostly just teach them, just go fight. Don't worry about anything else. We're just going to worry about fighting stuff, and that's it. I don't think that makes them successful in the SCA, because I've seen people do that. They get really good at fighting. They get to a point where they don't get better, but they're good, but they're never going to be the best necessarily. They realize that it depresses them and they go away because it's a wall they can't beat. If you give people something to work on for fighting, but you also show them what the world and the society is beyond that fighting and how you can affect that world, both with your fighting and without, then those people grow into the SGA and enjoy it more. And they branch into it more and they stick around. They still fight, but not everybody can fight forever. And I don't want my squires to feel like the second they can't fight to my standard, or for whatever reason, that somehow they're not worthwhile or I don't care about them. So I've always made it where there's a mix between, yes, I want you to fight hard, I want you to get out and train. That's what we are. We're fighters, but real life has precedence. The SCA off the field has precedence too in places. Make sure you have a good balance. Make sure you're taking care of yourself, both on and off the field, and that's worked pretty well. Of course, you could also make the case that since I've won in California, one in Florida, at various points they've been in places like Africa and Nepal, that they're just trying to go as far away from me as possible. Is a possible answer too. So, but they're all really great. I've been very happy with them. And then the few squires I've had that have moved on to become knights, very proud of them too. They've done good jobs. It's interesting to see how they grew and changed over time, and they've become excellent peers. And that's really great to see. It's very rewarding. But I'm also very proud of my non-peerage squires as well, because they have also had to go through an awful lot. They may not have been recognized as Shiv or other peerages yet, but they both, all of them, have put in a ton of effort to be involved, be good. They try to be knightly. And I stress very heavily, be knightly. Be very proud if you can be, but be knightly. And then we kind of go into a long process of what that means. The squires generally get a book for Charnay's Book of Chivalry.
Yep.
And it's something I want them to read and kind of try to understand the other aspects of things that they want to learn about that are fighting. That's fine. Like the various books you're reading that Sir Helgi from Kaid pushes hard. That's great. I don't limit them to just my thought process or my theory on fighting and non-fighting. I want them to expose to multiple areas as long as they follow 3 core rules, which is fight, fight, fight. Don't pee anyone, even if they're on fire. And there's a reason for that. And they can use my name in vain, not to have to do stupid things. So if someone tries to tell you to do something dumb like belt and boots and you don't want to do it, you can just say your knight won't let you do that, and I'll back you. That's fine. And as far as the second rule goes, that had some local history, and it was kind of funny, but at the same token, it was kind of meant to be a make sure you're paying attention to what you're doing at all times. I don't care if you go out and do crazy things here and there, but there's always a limit, and you have to have control, and you need to think things through. And it's not been a problem, but it's really broadly based. It's just kind of a funny way to say it.
You speak about knighted. How long had you been fighting before you got knighted?
Let's see. I got knighted in 2004, started fighting in roughly 91, so 13 years.
And then from your time you're knighted to the first crown?
Knighted in 2004, first crown was 2010. So 6 years.
All right.
And then
Not
I
bad.
did fight 2 mid-rum crowns, but I didn't obviously win either of those, but I got decent distance in. So I fought in 4 crowns total.
And some of the questions, some of our past episodes is, why are you fighting in crown? So I'll ask you what we've had before. Why fight in crown? What did you have a goal or anything that you want to accomplish if you won?
Yes, I'm a firm believer in having an agenda. Your agenda doesn't have to be evil. It doesn't have to be nefarious or anything like that. Agendas can be a good thing too. It can be something as simple as let's make this fun and make the trains run on time. It could be something as simple as let's highlight a certain area and give it some boost so that people like it better, things like that. For when I was fighting in the mid-realm, I was fighting for Victoria, and my main inspiration and goal there was that I thought she'd be an amazing queen, and I thought the kingdom would have benefited greatly from that. Whether or not I'm particularly good, I figured I could be good enough not to be an embarrassment. I wasn't sure how good I'd be otherwise, but she would have been amazing. And in Northshield, I fought for Sigrid because I like her a lot. She's a great person. And I thought the kingdom, again, could benefit greatly from that. And she deserved that chance to be a queen. And she was an amazing queen both times. So I managed not to get a crowd of pitchforked peasants coming out to kill me. I'm okay with that. But she was great. So, and as far as why to fight for crown, well, crown, much like peerages, it's a job, right? People, yeah, there's fun involved, but it's a job. And you have to look at it in the sense of, especially for Northshield, because we have small crowns, you can't just go in and go, well, I'm just going to go fight. It'll be fine. No big deal. If you're more than just a regular mid-level fighter, your odds of winning are not zero. They're not even close to zero. And people will argue me with that. I'm a believer that that's possible. Some don't believe that, but I think it is. And I think if you go into something like a crown without the serious intent of winning, you're setting yourself and your kingdom up for some problems. Because if you do win and you're not ready for it and you're not really interested in doing it, that's not a good combination of things, especially these days, obviously. And it's just, I think you should go in it with a serious thought that you're spending a year of your life and a lot of your money to support your kingdom and try to make things nice for people. I very much like the idea of being the MC of the party. You know, you show up, you try to help all the groups do something fun. You do administrative tasks as necessary. You'll make judgments if you have to, but mostly you're there to hand out awards, make it fun, make the party better for all groups, which is a different view than my view as a peerage. In fighting, I look at knighthood as being I'm a steward of the heavy community. And first and foremost, I need to focus on them a little more, not ignoring everyone else, but putting the main effort in the heavy world, because that's where my peerage is located, and making sure that they're getting what they need, and then helping everywhere else I can along the way when I have time. So, but crowns can't do that. You can't just focus down on one thing.
No.
You need to take care of everybody.
And that's well said.
Yeah. I just wish more people fighting in crowns took it with that thought. And I realize my viewpoint's not perfect. I'm not the be all end all of knowledge, but have that kind of thought or discussion with someone at least, so you understand what you're getting into and not just doing it for the glory. Because to be honest with you, the glory is super fleeting. And if you do bad, they're just going to remember you as being bad. That's not going to be the thing you want. You'll be the example of what not to do. And why would you want that?
Fair enough. You said you felt like you were the steward of your order, so of the chivalry. When you're looking at a candidate, what is it that you're looking for? What makes somebody knightly to you?
Well, that's how much time do we have? Okay.
Yeah.
So first and foremost, and this may be an unpopular opinion, the fighting is a bar, right? Like, to get into the discussion, I think you have to achieve beyond a certain point. And over the years, and between both changes in kingdoms from a very large kingdom with a large population of fighters to a physically large but number-wise small kingdom where they can't get near each other half the time because of the distances, I had to adjust my viewpoint a little bit on where I thought that fit. But you still need to have a bar that you're at least this good in fighting to be able to get into the discussion. After that, then you have to have the discussion on peer-like qualities, the infamous PLQs, how are you doing as far as training people? How are you doing as far as bringing up dependents of your own, which is tricky for unbelts, but not impossible. They can have men at arms. They can have people they're training. They could just have a friend in the group that they're taking care of. How are they doing with that? Because that gives you an indication of what they're going to do when they have dependents. If they don't know what they're doing at all, well, then you have a guess on, are they going to be good with dependents or aren't they? And some people are, and some people really aren't. And that can be, career ending for those people. You guys have been around for a while. You've seen it too. Like I have. Some people just don't do well with dependents, and that's that. There's 100 reasons why. That doesn't make them bad people. It just means that they aren't good with dependents. But when they take them, sometimes that drives those people out. If things go badly or they don't feel like it's going right, they just quit. And that's not necessarily a bad thing overall. It really depends what they're doing. But then you get the ones, unfortunately, that we've seen with actions taken against those shivs that remove them from the society because they took advantage of situations they shouldn't have. And that obviously becomes a problem too, where they use their peerage for, evil, I guess, for lack of a better term. So you want to try to not make those people, right? So when you're trying to recommend to your crown, you want to make sure that you're trying to do your best to get a good view of someone that can enter the order, be good with the populace, be good with unbelts and training, not dominate people by just their presence or their je ne sais quoi of things. You want them to be good people, and you want them to be good knights, which is part of the reason I like them to read de Chardonnay, because it helps with that a little bit. At least gives you a foundation. There are a number of other books and teachers. I really honestly like Vitus. I know that some people in your audience may not know who he is anymore, but I like what Vitus has to offer. He is a little bit of an extreme angry person in a way, but there's lots of good there on both what not to do and what to do, where to be stand strong on stuff, and where sometimes maybe you should think about it.
Yeah.
But I think he's a great guy. It's just
Yeah, I
and
would
we all
agree
have our
100%.
things. Yep. I can't say I've never gotten angry, because I certainly have, and I generally regretted it when I have. But yes, I think finding a person that meets the bar, has decent PLQs for whatever your kingdom expects, and then will grow and improve the society, or has at least the potential to do so when given the opportunity, is super important for someone you're evaluating. You know, the crown makes the choice, but yeah, you want to give them good choices.
So the last couple of years, obviously, we've been doing a lot of virtual stuff because of, worldwide pandemic and all. And there's been a lot of conversation online about the role of the chivalry and who the chivalry are and how they, and just how the order behaves as a whole. And I'm curious, have you been exposed, or are you aware of this? And what are your thoughts about that?
So yes, kind of. Before the pandemic hit, we were trying very hard, and I know this is not unique to us, but I can only speak from our discussion level. We tried very hard to be involved in trying to recognize and giving non-male fighters a good spot to be in, trying to make it clear that although, yes, we are a bunch of guys in the Shiv, and yes, we're pretty hardcore and we fight hard, we're not here to crush your hopes and dreams. We're not here to be jerks to you. And try to make it clear that if they had issues, we could come talk to them. They could come talk to us, hold us our feet to the fire. We have an oath. Here's our oath. We're supposed to live up to this. And this includes you. So we made a couple of statements on that publicly. We've tried to work around that. I think it's been generally better. There's still work to do, and there always will be, because I try to be incredibly open-minded with that. I try to be aware of where our pitfalls are and where our drawbacks are and work on them. But I have my own. There's a number of phrases that I just blurt out on occasion that are not just sort of gray area ones, they're red zone area ones. But, I've said them since I'm a kid. Sometimes you're not thinking, you say them anyway in a moment. And it's just like, okay, I'm an idiot. I shouldn't say that, or change this phrase, or as a minor one, like for instance, like people use cis a lot. I just don't like the word cis. I don't have any problem with the meaning. I don't have any problem with people using it. It's just like some people don't like the word moist, right? And for some reason, cis hits my brain like that. But as far as using a definition, have at it. But the world has changed a lot. And adding into that with the pandemic on top of that, we had a bunch of change going on. The pandemic shut down everybody from face to face. And now we're doing a lot of electronic communications. At least we have video communications, but the written word is not our friend.
That's for sure.
We had a lot of people where comments get loose and hard feelings happen fast. And I had to stop. I have a lot of friends on Facebook. I stopped following most of them, because literally every day from 2016 on, it was getting a fight with somebody because some idiot was saying something stupid to someone I thought was right. And then I wanted to jump in and help them. And so I just was fighting every single day on something. And it's so draining and it's not productive. So I just stopped doing that altogether, and then tried to move things back to this kind of communication, or in person when possible, because I think that's better. We treat each other much more civilly in person than we ever do when it's remote, and that's just a human failing. And I think it's important on us as the Shiv to realize that when we work with people, we're super intimidating without trying to be, for an awful lot of people. And knowing that, and I'm not saying you have to go like super woke or super hands off or touchy kind of thing. You can still be you, just be aware of what's going on. So when they don't respond like you think, or pay attention to the response, which some people don't do, you can adjust that path. You don't have to let them think you're some crazy berserker psycho. You're just intense. Well, that's fine, but they need to know that. And that's part of that is having good communication. And we don't communicate as well as we should on the field, and we barely communicate sometimes off the field. And I think that's something that shows like this, for instance, help a lot. You get to see a little more of the inner workings. You get to see people talking in a normal fashion. I'd really like to do things like this at bigger events, bigger camping events. I think having Shiv roundtables and having people show up and have a discussion are super critical to getting a very inclusive community. And that's better for us. I don't have a ducal coronet. I don't generally get introduced as His Grace unless it's something that's pertinent to that situation, largely because I feel like that more often than not, and this is not true in every case, but more often than not, once someone finds out you're a Duke and they didn't know what you were, their entire attitude changes, and not necessarily for the better. They get guarded. They get concerned that you could mess with them somehow if they're not nice to you. I don't like that. So I've been trying to push for, be responsible and recognize when someone has done something, they've made the effort. Great. Honor them for the work they put in. Same with the peerages. They put a lot of work in, honor them for that. That does not give them a free pass to expect special behavior or kowtowing or any of that. And I think that's something our order needs to be more self-aware of, be more proactive on changing that without losing what we are. And that's a balance that's, frankly, some of us are just not good on that. We're never going to be. We're not that type of person, but some of us are, and they're the ones that have to make the effort.
Yeah, it's an interesting way to put that. It's just, I think there's a balance across all that. It's because, to tell you the truth, one of the, I remember when I came in, that's what I wanted to see. I wanted that knight to be not right next to me as a buddy, but I wanted to be on that pedestal. So there is always going to be that, how they dress, what they wear, all of those pieces make that piece. And that's part of the game and the dream that we kind of build. But at the same time, I think it takes other people like what you're doing to say, oh man, that's what a Duke or a king looks like, and that's I got that feel and the game's live for me. But it also takes people like you that are standing right next to him that is like just chatting away, and even if they know you're a Duke or whatever, you're friendly enough or had developed a relationship enough that they know that this guy's representing something, but there's the other side of it too, that they're normal people and that, they do care. They care how you feel. They care, they want you to succeed. We've seen that in a million interviews. Almost every interview I've ever seen with the royal peer is all about what they can do for others to try to help them succeed. And so yeah, the balance is difficult because sometimes it sways on the other end, and you get that scenario where they get so intimidated that the only way to feel better is by finding flaws, right? And then those, then they dig in on those flaws, and it gets bigger and bigger. And so I think it takes a little bit of both sides to make the game work. And I think that the big key is to keep reminding people of that.
Yep. And we can always make progress. It's nothing is a monolith. No group's a monolith. We're certainly no different in that regard. And there are places you can use all of the examples. Anything can happen. It's part of the reason I like seeing more people reign, right? Like Northshield's still a young-ish kingdom. And I'm still a big fan of, once a fluke, twice a Duke, 3 times an asshole. I haven't fought in a third one. There's a reason for that. Not to say that everybody who fights in war is a jerk. It's just that, I think if you have an agenda that's useful to the kingdom, you're trying to do something good, fine. If you're just doing it for your own aggrandizement, I don't necessarily agree, but our system allows for that. And that's just my opinion. But I think having more voices over time, even if they make mistakes, it's better for the kingdom. It's a widening of the culture. It allows people to see different points of view, how to execute certain aspects of what's going on. And every reign has different problems. There are never 2 reigns that look, oh, well, this reign had the pandemic and this reign had some type of court case, or this one's had these people they had to get rid of, or all the officers quit, or something like that. Everything's different, and how they handle it is going to be a certain way. And of course, we've all reigned, so we have opinions, and usually strong opinions, on how we think they should handle that. But that's ultimately not our call. That's on them to make that. And then when they step down, it'll be the next person's group, and it adds value. Doesn't make it strife free. It's still going to have strife here and there, but that's where we as royal peers have to have a different job than individual peerages have, which is our focus is the kingdom. Our focus is making the kingdom work and the society functioning properly.
Yeah.
Not necessarily one tiny aspect, but the broad reach of it.
Well,
And
and we
that's
also
true.
have the ability to, counsel the crown, not only the ability, but the responsibility to
Yep.
counsel the crown.
Yep.
And that's a big part.
I agree.
So I'm curious, you're talking about the kingdom and the culture and making things better. You've lived in the mid and now you're up in Northshield. Can you compare and contrast the cultures of the two kingdoms for us, please?
To a point. Obviously it's from my perspective, so that could be, your mileage may vary. But so mid-realm, even before Northshield split off, or even before Eldamir split off for that matter, big space. They had unique cultures sort of in their areas, but it was one cohesive unit in a sense. It just had its regions. And even in the current mid-realm, you still have that. You still have your North and South Okins. You still have how Penamir and Okin react. It's friendly, but it's definitely like a rivalry of sorts, right? They have their different way of doing things. We all think we're right. So it's, that's how it goes. Having 300 something fighters with the mecca of fighting in my backyard for most of my early life was obviously very fundamental. It changed a lot of things about my fighting. It gave me tons of opportunities. Now, if you compare that to someone that lives in Minot, which is 10 hours away, their closest other group is 3 hours away, and both those groups are 5 people at best. They're not going to have the same opportunities. And if they want to come to our localized version of Mecca, which is Skogan or Madison, where the big groups are, then they have to drive 10 hours one way. That's an incredible commitment for someone that may not be in very long. So, being able to go from Grand Rapids to Detroit, that's 2 hours, 2.5 hours, straight line shot. That's not too bad. Coming, how many different groups do you have at your practice, Brannos? Like 8, 9 during the summer?
Oh man, I'm not only groups, but how many different kingdoms, right? I mean,
yeah.
Continents,
because we
now.
get a lot of visitors, so we're lucky.
Yep, and that's lucky for them too. Yes, it's lucky for you.
Oh yeah,
but it's incredibly lucky for them because the depth of knowledge, the different cultural sharing, the seeing how interkingdom anthropology works, it works in their advantage. The problem you run in a place like us is we end up in silos, to take it to like a work term, right? Like you don't want your groups to run in silos because you want the organization to work across their silos. And when they're left in one place, that's when you get big fish, small pond disease. When you get too isolated, you don't learn everything you could learn. You're just the one good fighter in your area maybe is dominating everything. And so everybody tries to be that person. Well, maybe that's not the best way to go. Or one weapon style takes over, that kind of thing. It's not the best way to go either. No matter how much I wish it was all polearm, that's not a good thing for everybody. So I think in the mid-realm, because of the size and the population density, you could have so many more voices distributed across a certain way to make this work with many different types of training opportunities. And if this practice doesn't work, well, you can go to this one instead. It's just slightly farther away. Here, the difference would be is this is your practice. You want to be in the SCA and you want to fight, this is it. Once in a while, maybe you go to a 2-hour away practice, and that's for a change, but you can't do that every week probably.
no.
So you got to get along with the group you're in. That's their set of teachers, all their great things and all their warts and scars, all of it together. That's what you get. And then travel, which is true in the mid-realm too.
Yeah.
But so critical here. And the travel distances are so long, but it absolutely has to happen. So one of the things I'd like to do, and I try to push other peers towards, is if you have space in your car, grab somebody, get a college student, or, pay for a gate fee and just tell the gate people, find some college kids and let them in. Here's the money for it. That kind of thing. It's not at our stage in life, $20 for a gate fee, which is a high gate fee. Who cares? It's a dinner. So I can sacrifice a dinner to give somebody a slightly better shot. And that $20 for them might mean a whole lot more. So, and it kind of goes back to our original oath, which is be as generous as your means allow, right? So, and that's never really left my mind either. So you try to do nice things where you can. You try to help people where you can to make it so they feel part of the community. And it doesn't matter if they know it's you. It is know someone in the community did it. Builds a greater collective bond, I think. And that's a little different here than mid-realm, because you guys don't have to have that cohesiveness. You can have Pentamere, you can have Oaken. We just have Northshield. And the West is a little different because it's so big and so far away. they, I think, feel really left out. And I know our Canadian brethren currently do because of the border issues, and they're also really far away. But we can only do so much too. Like we can't get 9-10 hour drives either. So we're just stuck realizing people are trying to do their best. And when you can make the effort, get together, work on things.
No, and I think, yeah, I think you're 100% right. And like you said, we have, within our fight practice for a while, we probably had, 2, 3, 4 other fight practices easily within an hour that we could go a week, right?
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah, when I
have-
lived in Lansing, that was the thing. I go to you guys sometimes. I go down to Grand Rapids or go to Kalamazoo, or, I never wanted for a fight practice. If I didn't go, it's because I didn't want to go.
Yeah, and you got different people all the time. That's the big point, is that you could be working. It's just like your leaf came here. He lived in near Cinnabar, and but he came here. He on Tuesdays he worked really hard on training. He'd go back to Cinnabar on on Thursdays or whatever other day and work and practice the things he learned. So he had this ability to kind of do 2 things at the same time, and it really helped his progress, right?
Yep. And he is everything on your former question, Bess. He's everything I'd like to see out of a candidate. If they were all your leaf, we would be an amazing society. Because he's done everything. One of the tests that I forgot to mention is drop somebody into an area and they can form a group.
Oh man,
He's done multiples. And he does it with a smile, and all of his people are happy people as far as I can tell. And it's
he's built a community.
That's what we want. Yes.
I'm on his group. They built a community. Everything from, hey, they're going to have dad's Sunday with the kids. So all the dads take the kids, and each dad is responsible for activities on a Sunday, and they go do it. Mm-hmm. And so he literally built a community out of an area he was dropped in. Not only an SCA community, but a real community.
Yep.
These are the people that are coming over his house for Thanksgiving. These are the people that are celebrating Christmas together. These are and many of them are way younger than he is, because they're still in school up there. Mm-hmm. But many of them need that because they lost. They if you look where they probably came from, it was probably just getting up there is a long way. So any of their families are probably 4, 6, 10 hours away at least.
Yep.
And he gave them a place where they know they have somebody that cares about them and that wants them to be better and to work with them and things like that. And and if he gets anything like me, he gets the benefit of learning from them. And a lot of times people like, well, I'm teaching. They take the opportunity to learn, because I can tell you at 50, getting into the later 50s, I have learned more about modern culture, and what I mean by modern culture, but the way culture has changed, than I probably would have ever learned before, because I would never have been hanging out and talking with and having to help somebody, or them telling me what the issues are, or me being able to say, I don't understand what this means, and them helping me understand it, or them living it, everything from gender change to all of that kind of thing. Would I have been around it? No. But because I know somebody, it makes it even more personal. I can understand it better. Mm-hmm. And I can't pray. I really, for me, I talk about this a lot with a lot of people, inside and outside the SCA, because I think it's just a great point of growth, and what I really, I can help them with lots of stuff as an older person, but they are helping right back.
Yep, I agree. It's a two-way street. Both sides gain.
Yep, and that's what makes a community, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep, and we're better when we have a good community.
I would agree 100%. All right, I'm going to throw this back into, what was your light bulb moment?
Which stage?
Oh, let's hear. Let's start with stage 1, and then we'll move on.
Okay, so the first thing I think that really stuck out for me was realizing I could fight a polearm close against a shield and beat them. And it happened a couple times, first by accident. you may recall this, Brannos, but Bess probably doesn't know, but Rye, when Rye was
Oh,
still
yeah.
around, was my original liege lord, and he taught me the initial bits of polearm. I was one of his men at arms, so he wasn't a knight, so no squire, but you know, he was a good guy. He taught me a lot. His fighting style is not like my current fighting style at all, but initially that made a huge difference. Mike LeCoux and Ranthofer were the other ones that did polearm that made a big difference, but they were mostly showing me how a typical SCA polearm fights. Michael had supreme physical skills, so
Yes.
he could do some things, but his style was still kind of basic, what I would consider now anyway, basic polearm. You know, the stuff that most
Yeah, he was
knights are pretty good at. He
athletic.
was just better. Yep. Ambidextrous, very athletic, driven. He could do a lot. Ranthofer was less physically driven, but he was pretty precise. He was decent. Rye, just willpower, just overwhelming willpower to do what he wanted to do, you know, storm be damned kind of stuff. He was going to do it. And those things helped a lot, but none of them really fought inside. You know, if a sword and shield jumped them, their answer was simply run away. And seeing, I'm having a brain moment. His Grace
Palomar?
down. Which one?
Palomar?
No. Polearm, Smash Mouth. Palomar.
Yeah, Palomar.
You said Palomar. Sorry, I misheard it. Yeah, that is. I'm old. The seeing him fighting close was a light bulb in the sense of, okay, this does work, but trying to figure out how to adapt it, I couldn't really get exactly what he wanted out of it, like what he was doing, because we didn't have videos back then. We
No.
didn't have what we have now for training or YouTube. So trying to figure it out on the fly wasn't really working. So at a West Michigan practice, we had an area where there was a piece of dirt on the ground that was maybe 4 feet across. And so I just stayed in that. Everybody at the practice could run me over, run through me with sword and shield, didn't care. I was just going to fight there. And I did that as long as I could stand it, because, you know, it gets depressing to get your beat down that bad all the time. So I'd spend about a half a practice getting my head knocked in. And, you know, and that's with people like Logan and Lucian and Morgan and, you know, Steve and all the others that were there. And so it wasn't like it was a fun beatdown necessarily either, but, you know, trying to figure out something. Eventually I started to see inside angles. And that was a big light bulb for me on that. Was just I had to persevere through a mountain of crap to find where there was a path. And then that gave me the first bit of, okay, there are things here I can do. I just have to play a little Donald Duck and Mathland in my head of cut this angle off with the big plane of intersection. And that lets me know they're going to go over here. And that's before I got some of your information, Brannos, because I hadn't really been out your way much yet by that point. And then, so I built up to the point where I was probably a mediocre level at this point anyway, polearm fighter. The second light bulb moment was when I went to your practice and I survived a few shots and you crushed me. And I went to the sideline and everybody's like, oh my God, you did so good. And I'm like, I just got my head handed to me. What are you talking about? And they're like, but you lasted like 3 shots. I'm like, you find that acceptable? Like, in what universe is it just took him a little longer to kill me a good thing? I mean, that's not a win. That's a, you sucked a little bit less. And so it took a bit to realize, okay, he's doing something here. What's he doing? And I was watching your training methods and that got my attention. And so I started to try to figure out how I could adapt what you were telling me from sword and shield into polearm. And it took a little while, but that light bulb occurred with the pressure there. And that made the first big jump, I think. Knowing I could do inside was the first one. That was good, but I think that's not that amazing. Knowing how to apply different thought processes to make things work even better, to figure out new techniques, how to use them, that was the first major jump. And then I didn't have that completely spelled out in my head. Like, it became intuitive. And then you, Ronvalder, and one of your unbelts, we did one of the practice there where you broke down what I was doing on the helicopter shot. Because I knew how to do it, I just didn't know how to teach it. And so you guys broke that down, figured it out, which then again, that gave me even more information to adapt to do more things with it, more angles, different inside angles. And that worked really great, honestly. And all of that is for me trying to exercise fighting outward. From a mind standpoint, where I got something from you is when I asked how in the heck do you murder people that, when I fight them, I get hard fights at them. And then when you fight them, they just give up. Like it's over before you start. And then you gave me the thing with your reputation kills people and you just have to walk out and finish it kind of thing in places. I mean, you're still doing all the things you're doing, but when they see you're there and you're ready, it just clicks off switches in their head and they give up. And I didn't get that till after the second reign, which is part of the reason I stopped worrying about the Duke thing. If you walk out and you say you're a Duke and you have a polearm and you don't give any craps about the sword and shield people, it clicks things off in their head. They figure it out really quickly. And some of them come out, piss and vinegar, and they're pretty sure they're just going to crush you. But the second they don't crush you, you can see the deflation. And
right.
even more so, you can see the deflation on the sidelines.
Yep. And some of that actually, there are times when it's like, okay, this is going to be a hard fight, so you look at it and you have to take your time. And in fact, you're slowly, you give them some opportunities that are very safe for you to do some things so that they can be, so those things fail. And the more things they have fail, the more they're getting used to failure. And they're checking off in their head that so far, nothing worked. And now they're fighting themselves. Mm-hmm. And, that as soon as you instill a sense of doubt, now you're just opening the canyon.
Yep.
Right. And and that's exactly what you're talking about.
Yep. I do a set of 3 shots. Most of our TOCs out here tend to be when the Wackenite section happens. They have choices, but it almost always is 2 out of 3. Usually fight all 3. I do 3 set fights. They're designed to test what they know, how much of a threat they are, and then if they can fix the thing that killed them first. But they're demoralizing in a sense because everybody knows I can throw a circle jerk. Circle jerk's the oldest trick in the freaking world with polearms. It should be known everywhere, but people forget about it. So if you throw a circle jerk and it kills them, you can just watch their shoulders slump.
Oh yeah, they're done.
More often than not, they're already saying, I should have known this before I've hit them, because they know it's coming and they can't stop it by that point. They made a mistake. But then that loss sticks in their head. They can't clear that loss out of their head. So when I come back with just doing like a helicopter, and I usually just set them up to charge and then helicopter shot over the top on them, that one hits. And usually it looks effortless. It's not, but it looks it because it's a well-polished move at this point. And that watches the, morale go down a little bit more. If they sink too far, if they're not a high-end fighter, then I usually stop and talk to them at that point because I don't want them to be demoralized. If they're a high-end fighter, I don't, because I want to see if they can figure out how to fix their problem. Because at this point, it's really a them problem more than a me success because they've lost their edge. And the third fight, whichever thing I thought they did worse on, is the thing I go back to. And if they can stop that, like they stop the circle jerk, fine. Then we progress into the next set of the fight, move along, and see what they do. But if they don't, then that's where we have a talk on the side usually for a minute and try to explain, this is what I was doing. This is why it worked. This is what it looked like from the outside. This is how I read your energy in this fight. And yeah, it sounds all crystals and unicorns, but it's true. This is how it works. So, and then, try to give them something else. So when they come back later, hopefully and fight, they come back out with some, energy and they want to take it to me a little more. And that's all stuff I pulled from you over the years, to be honest. I watched you do that at TOCs, practices, wars, champions fights, everything. And it's just a matter of trying to figure out how to adapt that over time. So that was the last kind of big aha thing I think I really had, was that. And then integrating jujitsu stuff just made me better. So that was all fighting skills side of things. From a standpoint, and Brannos is involved in this one too. Here's so many of my stories. All of us get old and all of us lose an edge as we age. Excuse me. Yeah, throat's getting all phlegmy. When I was just before I got my captain rank, it was at the Tarek was king. We're at Bertha Brock Park. Eli was out there fighting, and he was still fighting his old style. And Eli's a great fight, he's historically a great fighter, but he was still fighting his old style, and he was getting his head smashed in for it because it had passed him by. It wasn't that he was passed by so much as the style had aged to a point where it was no longer super usable and viable, much like dished round shields are pretty much gone. Not completely, but largely because there's just the game is evolved and that doesn't work very well anymore. It's just something either people adapt or they get their head crushed in until they quit. And for a lot of the older knights, I think before this point, they just would give up. Like they get to a point, they figure they'd lost their edge and they would just fight occasionally or give up entirely. They never really tried to fix it. They just wanted to be better at what they knew. I can't remember all the details. This is more of a youth thing, but I do remember that there was a conscious effort on his part and the Baron of Roaring Waste also. He was
Munori.
yeah. There's a couple of people that were working on physically changing their game to the more modern style, which took unlearning and relearning, swallowing your humility, learning how to move forward and make those changes, which was
Oh,
hard.
actually, you're probably talking Garahan, weren't you?
Yes. Yep. Sorry. Munori was the
that's
Japanese. Okay. Yep. Memory. Yeah. So but seeing him go through that and seeing some other knights over time go through that, put a light bulb off on, I need to do this now. I had to figure out how to trim down my style to be more efficient, to make it more manageable, make it adaptive, so that when things did change, I could make a quicker change to it and not have to unlearn everything to relearn something, make it a little more modular in my head. And trying to reduce the need for physicality to make my game work. So I can fight all day and I'm not a svelte individual anymore. I had heart surgery. I have multiple broken joints and I can still fight an entire day, usually longer than the younger knights or most all the unbelts because I'm efficient. And the efficiencies were built in and trying to not just learn my shots, but learning how to adapt my shots to changing conditions, whether that's me physically deteriorating or something has changed in the game where something I wanted to do just doesn't work right. I have to make a new wiggle to it or a new change or something, or just pay attention to the young guys and see what they're doing different,
Exactly.
So that was a big one. And that was largely started because of seeing Eli go through his struggles. And he did an amazing job.
He did. I talk about that all the time. Between him and Palomar did the same thing. Yep. Amazing. I hope I grow up and be just like him.
Yep. I wish Palomar had done that with his polearm. I know he changed his sword and shield a bunch, but I wish he'd stuck with polearm because he's a fundamental pillar of polearm society in the SCA is Palomar. And
I agree.
He doesn't fight it really anymore, and that's disappointing in a visceral way.
It's I think the big piece there is and they talk about this all the time, the willingness to lose, and you have to be. That cup has to be empty. So, what we see a lot, especially as you get better and better at something, is you got everyone looking at you like, oh, you're a knight, you're supposed to win, or you're royal peer, you're supposed to even win more, right? And then internally, you're hearing all of this in one ear, and internally, you don't want to disappoint the people that are looking at you and that piece. So you got this battle going on, but on the other end, you still. The only way to stay in and stay good is that willingness to lose, to reinvent, to change. Mm-hmm. And so you could get this battle going on in yourself, right?
Yep, totally agree. I don't like losing. No one likes losing, but it's useful. Both for you and your opponent. Mm-hmm. So you can't let it drive you to inaction. You can't let it make you fearful of learning. And too many people are afraid of losing. It's hard to fight that in the moment, right? When you're in the middle of a fight, you just have to fight. If you're thinking about losing, you're probably going to lose because you're putting the wrong energy in your fight. Afterwards, if you mull on it too long, you might as well just go out and start hitting the crack pipe because you're pretty much screwing yourself right there.
Yeah, so you're nailing it.
Yeah.
I tell people, and I've watched this because I've been lucky enough to watch a lot of crowns and have a lot at my practice, and a lot of that have been friends or taught. And it's always interesting watching while a person's on the throne. There's a lot of things pulling on you. So sometimes you don't get as much practice, you don't get as much fighting. You absolutely have to be the person winning, right? So you don't put yourself out in those battle places as freely as before, let's say. But then there's a mindset that gets placed because everyone's like, you're the rock star, right? You're the, top actor. So you can't do anything wrong. And then it's done, right? You get tossed out, you lose all your money, and you're back in fight practice. And you go and start fighting a few people, and you struggle because all of a sudden it's like, hey, wait, it's like, oh, I don't have to worry about it. And all these bad habits developed. And then instead of fixing those bad habits, what you do is you fight the next person down.
Yep.
And then you fight the next person down after you start losing to them and not feel good about it. Until you hit that place where you're like, either there is no farther down or I am not willing to go out any far. What happened? You look at yourself and you say, what happened? And that's where it's another point of, well, maybe I just won't fight as much because I don't want to be that guy that, I don't want to, if I still want to be in everybody's mind as a great fighter, but I'm not.
Right.
Or you say, hey, I'm not a great fighter, but I know I did it once. I'm going to do it again.
Sure. One of the things,
letting go of that ego, to establish, to go back to it, that's hard.
it is.
It's to come back from, being a year and a half off before you had your heart stuff, and then having to come back and start it all over again. And, the reality is the Knights have the biggest egos in the known world. I think that's a fair thing to say. And it's hard when you get your ego handed to you out of practice. It's
Oh yeah, my ego is just as big as anybody else's, trust me. And I like to joke about it with people all the time. And a number of us out here joke back and forth about it. Like Vlad and I will go back and forth, and it sounds like we're the biggest jerks ever because we're just, peeing in each other's Wheaties. And it's mostly for show because we try to make a point of that this is really not how it should be. We're just joking around because we know each other. But sometimes if somebody didn't know us, was on the side, they might think it was real. But for the most part, no. So that does bring up an interesting point on how to avoid that. And the way I've avoided it is I turned my fighting into a crusade of sorts. I joke about the one true weapon. I mean, all weapons are fine, but polearm is underrepresented. Two sticks underrepresented. I'm not going to fight two stick, but I do fight polearm. So I try to push it in all situations and all locations as a valid alternate style that you can fight in any place, anytime, and be very effective. And it runs into pushback. There are definitely some people that are motivated polearm fighters that they're already doing what they need to do, but they're not really my target audience. My target audience is the people that are starting out, want to try something different, and they have to suffer the slings and arrows to get to the point where they can be decent. And that also leans into monocultures. For some kingdoms, I've traveled most of the US at this point at one time or another. And when I go to someplace new, like I had a squire move out to Kaid, and Kaid is full of wonderful people. I have not had a bad interaction with anybody in Kaid, to be clear, but they do not fight polearms in tourneys at all. And they're a little better, but at the time when I went out there, they just assumed they were going to beat me. And it certainly didn't end up that way. I think I lost less than a half dozen fights over 4 days when I was out there the first time, because every trick I know works.
Yeah.
Because they're sword and shield fighters. They're good sword and shield fighters, but they don't fight against even standard polearms much, and certainly not one that built his entire repertoire about beating sword and shields. So it made it difficult. And it was kind of a light bulb for them in a sense on this is what it can be. But then you also run the risk of being the special snowflake. Like, oh, you're the only one that can do this anywhere. And it's like, well, no, it's just there's not a lot of people doing it, but I am certainly not. I am not overly fast. I'm not overly strong. I'm not skinny. I'm not young, and I'm broken, and I'm still managing this. So yeah, it took a long time, but yeah. And so trying to get people out of this one weapon fights this one other weapon always, when we have half a dozen weapon styles, it makes it better. Part of the reason that the East and the Mid-Realm, besides having the numbers, are so good in various champion fights, I think, is because all of their super top end can fight every weapon at least competently, if not great. And B, they've fought against every weapon with basically every other weapon. I don't think you're particularly known for your polearm, Brannos, but I would consider you a threat. I've fought you multiple times. I've seen you fight people. You know the weapon. You know how it can be used. You don't
Yeah,
maybe have
second crown, I
every
beat
technique.
Morinori with
Yeah.
polearm in the finals, right?
Yep, exactly. I remember that fight. Oh,
So,
I think you're on mute,
oh,
Bess.
oh, okay. Bess, you're on mute.
It's okay. I was agreeing. I was like, I remember seeing that fight. You did. Because
Yep.
I would agree, Brannos. I don't think of you as a polearm, but I do remember. Wow.
Yep. But see, that's a difference of the culture I was brought up in, and a lot of people in the middle are brought up in, where you may have a particular style that you were great in, but you were taught to be good in everything. I didn't get knighted just because I could fight polearm. I had to fight some sword and shield too. Now, to be honest, most people out here have not seen me pick up a sword and shield recently at all, and when they have, it's been right-handed. But I can fight it. And it's not quite quickly down under. So in fact, I have a great video from this last summer where I was trying to show some of our polearm fighters how to attack sword and shields. And so I picked up Lars's sword and shield, fought it right-handed. I can't use my right hand for anything. I am aggressively left-handed. So this hand is weak noodle garbage.
Yeah.
But I can block. So I just literally walked them down. We're in a giant open field, just block, 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 until I got right up on top of them and then just kept slapping them with a sword until they were dead. It wasn't pretty, but it was effective. And the point was, as long as you keep in this, you can make this work. It's not like you're just going to fight one weapon style. Even though I don't use it much, I still know what each weapon style does. And I have a history of that, or a background built into my head from that. So it's important, I think, people fight all of them, because it gives you different angles, it gives perspectives, and it just makes you better. Even if you just fight sword and shield, it still makes you better. So, and other kingdoms have gotten away from that because I think they're laser focused on, this is the style that wins crowns, and all I want to do is fight this one style, so I'm not wasting a single second on anything else because I want to win crown. And I think that's a big drive for a lot of kingdoms, and I don't think it's a healthy drive. But
so do you think maybe some of that also comes from how much melee that came, our kingdoms come out of? Because it's like, I'm a polearm fighter in melee, so, or spear or axe or whatever, but.
So, yeah, could be. I mean, some of the kingdoms definitely have melees, but so I've been to Great Western War, fun war, by the way, great people, good time. The melees are definitely not Penzik. Just the energy of it, the way it flows, is not as dynamic, I guess. It's still heavy fighting, it's still people moving around, but it just doesn't feel the same. And I haven't been to enough to really nail it. I hadn't really thought of it heavily, but it is definitely different. Yeah, maybe. I mean, it could be. And Mid-Realm and East definitely focus heavily on, the rank and file. Melee is definitely a thing. The high end are both, but.
And then you go to Callantyr, they're everything, right? Every weapon.
Yeah, that's true.
So
Yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't really thought of that, but that could definitely be the case, because the Outlands is also another one that fights a lot of melee, and they have great weapon diversity.
Yeah,
they have a lot of Madus, but they have polearm fighters that fight singles. They have two stickers, the sword and shield, various shapes, and they fight a ton of melee too. So
and when you first start, it's an easy way to get wins is melee. So people really focus that way. And you might have big shields to start, but really in a lot of groups, it's like grab whatever you want, type of deal.
Yep.
So
that's true.
We have a viewer question actually, and earlier you were talking about your wrist and tearing things up and big surgeries. And the question that we have is, do you know the cause of your injury? Do you think it was from throwing wraps?
No, because I don't throw wraps with a polearm. Not really. I mean, you can kind of, but it's mostly one-handed, and you're probably desperate by that point. But the let's see if I can find something real quick that can describe it. This will work. So we're going to use a pill jar. So if you assume this was the end of a polearm, right? So the way I hold my polearm is like this on the back end. So these fingers are clear, and when I want to throw a thrust, I throw it like that. Let's see. There. So
I know
I start like this, and I go like this, right? So it ends up here. So that repeated action, rip a ligament in here. Not massively, but yeah. I wouldn't suggest if you rip a ligament in your wrist, see if they'll just fix it. Don't get the marker dye fluoroscope to see it, because it's painful. They
Yeah.
weasel a needle between your overlapping wrist plates to put the marker dye in so they can see that. And you can feel it scrape on every plate, and it's not fun. But and when they fixed this, they cut me all open and did all that bits. It took a while to get that back, to be honest. But I'm glad I did. It took the pain out of it, because I couldn't throw a single thrust without it hitting that after it broke, and that was real painful. But
So
yeah,
have
it
you
was
changed that?
repeated
Because
thrust.
that's something I do with the spear all the time, because it allows you to develop force
Mhm.
and it puts less tension on your wrist breaking.
Yep, absolutely. I still throw them the same way.
Okay. I was wondering.
It was the difference, I think, between you and I on that is it might be a little bit with angle, but it might also be that I've done a lot more thrusts in my career.
Yeah, probably.
Because
Well, yeah.
form.
Yeah.
So just a lot more repetitiveness. And then, like at this point, I've got decent forearms at this point, so I can hold the weapon one-handed, no problem. At length, I can just keep it level for as long as I want on one hand. So I can throw it around. It works. But and I can get a fair bit just with this grip. And if it gets caught here, it's still enough to kill most people, unless I need to throw against a hard breastplate or something, and then I got to really drill it because, well, metal.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, actually. You're sitting down, so I don't know how tall you are. Are you a tall person? Did pole help you? Were you tall?
No, I'm 5'11". I'm currently
Oh,
about 255 pounds, so a little heavy for my size. At I guess you could say the height of my physical aspects, I was about 230, same height. I'm modestly strong. The forearms are pretty good, but the rest of me is pretty average. I didn't focus on those things. I didn't want to try to be the fastest guy. I've seen fast fighters, because fast fighters almost always end up being pattern fighters, and all you have to do to beat them is break it. And that can be tricky and hard, but if you break a pattern fighter, they have not usually a good response. And if you take a fast fighter and you just jump them a little bit before they can throw, they don't usually have a good response. So, outthinking the physical skills, your brain is going to be stronger than the physical more often than not. And once you get to a certain point, physical skills only take you so far.
And I think that's the piece is, it's like you're that average, but you're not, right? Your will and your mind and all of those pieces and your understanding of what you're doing is what really has been really the tools, that
Mhm.
that you have lived on and got you here.
Yep. I could have worked out every day forever and I wouldn't have been better necessarily, but learning how to adapt things, learning how to take various people's very successful things like pressure and drive and just willpower, and then executing it and willing to accept losses so you can try to be a winner, down the road. You can't let that drive you to a bad place. You got to let it drive you to a good place. All those things over time, they build you up. And it's important to look at things from a positive perspective, because you want to build up. You don't want things to tear yourself down. Don't do your enemy's job for you, or for them. I mean, recognize a loss, understand it, but don't dwell in it.
No, use it. You use it as motivation.
Yep.
Feed on it. That's the big one.
Yep. You'll never find a great fighter that remembers their wins. They only remember the bad losses.
Yeah, and it's not that they remember them like they're mad. Well, there's
Right.
a little bit of mad, but that mad drives right into the I'm going to work harder.
Yep. It's motivational material. It's billboard material. Like Tom Brady gets mad about someone saying something weird about him someday and comes out and just all piss and vinegar in the football game because he wants to go get him, and he's just one example. All high-end athletes, I think, do the same thing. They always look for that thing. Michael Jordan used to make up beefs with other people just so he could be motivated to go try to crush them in the next game. So,
well, and actually there was a great quote that came out of the book. Is like, everybody remembers how often Michael Jordan shot the last shot to win the game, right? In fact, he in stats, he is has been way over anyone else in basketball, right? Also in stats, he missed just as many shots, but nobody talks about those.
Yep. It's true. Like Brett Favre's a good example too. He has some of the highest touchdown totals of any quarterback and the highest interceptions.
Exactly. But he's willing to do it.
Yep. No
he's
risk
not
it, no
freezing
biscuit.
himself.
Okay, but look at baseball. A great batter bats 300, which means they lose or they don't hit 2/3 of the time. But you bat 300 and you are awesome. Like, oh my God, great batter. You mostly lose. You realize that, right?
Yep. But that's the thing, that they do know that. And they don't let that be the problem. They don't let that drive them. They think about getting to 301 or 302 or 303, not, oh, well, I missed 700 and now I'm 701. They don't think that way. They think about the driving towards being better. You can't let the failures drive you, because people forget that we lose to everybody in SCA fighting, right? Like, you don't win every fight. And if you fight people enough, everyone's going to beat you. Even new people will beat you sometimes, totally legitimately too. It's just, they will click everything. And none of us are indestructible super god fighters or something, even if we're great. And we make mistakes. People learn how to beat us. It's just what it is. But you don't worry about losing. You just use it, like you said, for motivation.
All right.
Wait, we have one more question.
Okay.
What styles did you fight before the injury, other than polearm, if you fought any? And what styles do you fight now?
I technically fight every style, but I don't do them all very often. But that's partly by a conscious choice at this point. I look at part of my role as trying to be like, for lack of a better word, like an avatar for polearm. I try to use it against everybody, every situation, one-armed, offhand one arm, from my knees, melee, non-melee, against every weapon style, and try to show people how they can use them that. However, I do sometimes pick up two-stick or a weird mix of two-stick where it's not two-sword, spear and glaive and axe and just all types of things. I don't do it a ton, but I do it enough that I'm not going to hurt myself or hurt anybody else. I try to give people a good fight with it. And I've been in tournaments where, I had to fight sword and buckler, or I have to fight two-stick. I do fine. But mostly I just prefer to push my style.
Well, it's been an incredible show, and it's been really, I tell you, I'm going to get you back, because I like the way you think about stuff, and at that mindset. Obviously, you spent a lot of time there, and I'd love to get some more feed on that. I'm thinking about doing possibly a couple shows on some of the stuff, a couple of the books that I've been going through. So I might reach out to you if you don't mind.
Sure, I'd be happy. I'm always happy to talk fighting, and anything that makes more good fighters. Our main goal is to replace 100%. Ourselves, right?
Yes,
we want to replace
that's
ourselves.
That's why we're here, right? And I'd like to thank everybody out there. I know this weekend's a big Gulf Wars. Lots of people on the way down to Gulf Wars, and they're supposed to have great weather. A little cold the first couple nights, but then it's supposed to be wonderful. I hope that it revitalizes the SCA. I hope that, obviously it's going to be a little smaller, but I think people are going to be, with the weather and getting a chance to see each other again and be around others again. I can't wait to see the pictures. I'm looking forward to life being fed back into the SCA.
Yep, totally agree.
And thank you very much. I know this fed a little life back into me, just because it was so good. And this took way too long. I should have grabbed you way earlier than this. And but I definitely will reach out, and we'll talk about some stuff. Cool. I might pull you in with one with Conrad or something. So Bess, thanks. And you didn't talk too much or ask too many questions. You asked all the really good questions. In fact, those are great. You made for a great conversation tonight.
Yeah, thank you.
And for all our audience, thank you for coming out again and visiting with us. Come visit Coach's Corner page, ask questions, lots of good content up there. Our YouTube, all of these go on to our YouTube page. We have tons of content now on the YouTube page. This is our 103rd episode. We have a lot of small training videos. Remember, we have the video library as well that allows you to look up and see lots of videos that are out on the internet. By type of weapon, by person, by skill set. allows you to sort those and then go and do it and watch them. So lots of great content out there. If you have a question, pop it out on the page. It's the best way to get lots of, the community there is filled with great teachers. And I learn every time people ask questions there, I learn more. So thanks again. And thanks everybody for showing up. But before we leave, I'm going to ask Bess, because I see if she did her homework. Bess, what's next week?
I happen to know that it is Mid-Realm Heroes and Traditions. I wonder who we're going to talk about.
Well, remember, this will be the first one, so it ain't going to be me, 'cause I'm a baby.
Well, you are actually in the mid.
But
it's going to be super exciting.
it is. And you know what the coolest part, and for all my mid-realm friends out there, this is a great chance to come learn a little history. They're going to have Talamar there, and Eli and Dog. I thought they were going to maybe try to reach out to Moonwolf, see if they could get them, but looks like a great episode. So I'm definitely going to be watching, just because, you know, it's mid-realm history, so I want to know.
Yeah, totally. I'm actually looking forward to that one too, because I know some of these people, but I don't know all their stories.
Yeah,
So.
and you know, it's been fun on those traditions, because in the traditional ones, because there's so much conversation in the comments, because everybody's watching, everybody knows, so it's easy to make a bunch of comments. So those have been kind of fun.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right, we'll let everybody go. We're a little bit past, but thank you all, and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thanks a lot.